This video contains spoilers for Final Fantasy XIV, Shadowbringers, and Endwalker. Upon the back of my trusted horsebird, I rode north and east from Mordona. As I was tasked with delivering a missive of some import from Hozan, I sought to hurry to the great forest of the Black Shroud, and so I dared cross a near-frozen stream once I entered the central highlands of Kurthus. My steed and I evaded the wild beast with speed and endurance, though there were times when we were nearly caught by claw and fang. Yet harsher still was the winter chill, as I was reminded when we stepped into a stream that had not known warmth in 5 years. Turning southwards, I came into a blasted, barren landscape. No snow or ice marred the land here, yet it was far more desolate than the frozen scape of Kurthus. Dead trees jutted out from the earth like spent arrows upon a battlefield, with only patches of withered grass breaking the monotony of bare rock and dead wood. I consulted my maps twice, thrice. Was this truly the North Shroud, the start of the endless forest near the heart of Eorzea? A trio of guards at a nearby watchtower confirmed that I was on the correct path. As I gazed at a far-off ruin that dwarfed Doma Castle in size, I wondered at what kind of devastation could have scourged this land to lay such a woodland low. I pressed on. My only respite from the shattered landscape was the companionship of my steed and a comely inn called the Bobbing Cork. It was only after I passed the inn that I saw the first signs of true greenery, scores of tall trees with broad leaves of green and yellow, so dense that I could not see past them, save for the road that cut through the forest. As I followed the road, guided by the lanterns marking the way, I could smell at once fresh loam and underbrush, and hear the running of creeks full of crystal-clear waters. I was close now. Not even the sudden rainstorm that soaked me to the bone could deter me. And there, through the gray mist and rain, I saw the yellow serpent gate, a deceptively humble entryway of wooden palisade and wrought metal, with the namesake symbol proudly emblazoned at the top. And once through the gate, led on by the glow of lanterns through a valley, I came to a view like unto a dream. Trees as tall as the stone pillars in the Gensui chain, great halls of wood unmarred by pests or weather, a bubbling brook flowing throughout, people laden with the bounties of the forests, while flowers of all colors lined the roads and roofs of many buildings. I had come at last to Gridania. Among the city-states of Eorzea, Gridania is, in many ways, the most peculiar to those accustomed to more conventional cities. It is not for the obvious reasons. Yes, it is true that Gridania is more built amongst the trees rather than where they once stood. It is true that were you to step outside its gates, you would be, for the most part, greeted not with the sight of endless fields of grain or outlying villages, but with a veritable wall of forest as far as the eye can see. It is not quite as bustling as many of its sister cities. Gridania is not a merchant stronghold like Ul'dah, or a cosmopolitan port like Limsa. No, the difference is this. In other nations, humanity rules humanity, be they by a king, an emperor, or a ruling council of electeds. In Gridania, humanity is ruled by the divine, the elementals. Elsewhere, mankind is nature's master. Wilderness is tamed, forests cut, beasts driven away. Farms are planted, walls are raised, and cities spring up, connected to one another by roads like a web. In Gridania, however, nature masters mankind. In Gridania, game is not hunted, and trees are not felled at the whims of hunters, woodcutters, and merchants seeking profit. Lumber and meats are taken after careful consultation with the true rulers of the Twelveswood. Here, humanity is as a guest living off the bounty of its host, and the host will suffer no disrespect or greed in its home. Those that violate the strained hospitality of the forest are removed from it, violently, through a terrifying expression of nature's fury known as the Green Wrath. and its mortal servants are more than eager to assist their masters. Thus, it is said by Eorzeans that Gridanians are a peculiar lot, in particular the Forestborn, who were birthed, raised, and steeped in traditional Gridanian culture. Their reverence for nature, where others merely marvel at its beauty, may strike outsiders as queer and, at times, rigid or even cruel. The people of the Twelveswood are friendly and welcoming, of course, yet the points of their lances and arrows are nothing compared to their uncompromising decisions made with the blessings of those they revere most. Many a refugee come begging to its gates, and many a refugee are turned aside when the elementals of the Twelveswood reject them for reasons unknown. One so barred from the woodland realm, its gatekeepers would brook no further argument. The Twelveswood is nature unbridled, and the Gridanians who reside in it have adopted much of the outlook of nature in turn. The wilderness is beautiful in the gentle whisper of the wind rustling through the branches, the scent of its flowers, the greenery of a clearing in late spring. And the wilderness is pitiless, terrifying in the summer storms, the winter snows, the swarms of vilekin that rip into flesh, the ravenous wolf who devours the pregnant mother deer, even as its babe is torn, still living, from her womb, then devoured in turn. Yet, as unusual as it is, or perhaps because of it, I could not help but be fascinated by the city. Though the Twelveswood has been slow to rejuvenate from its wounds inflicted by the Seventh Umbral Calamity, life in Gridania endures, even thrives, and there are few other places in Eorzea I would rather be in late spring and autumn. When I see a Gridanian botanist care for a humble row of cabbages as a parent would for their own children, there is a warmth to it that helps me comprehend the love these people have for the land that cares for them, nurtures them, and protects them. So then, I would tell you the tale of Gridania, the city upon the trees, the faithful servants of the Black Shroud. The tale of Gridania begins with war. The Elezen peoples of Eorzea claim that they have lived in Aldenard since time immemorial, more than 10,000 years ago, in the time that the Eorzeans call the First Astral Era. Through the ages they persisted, surviving invasions, conquest, and catastrophes. In the 7th century of the 6th Era, almost 1,000 years ago, came a wave of migration. A band of Hyur, seeking new lands to settle, eagerly contesting the Elezens' dominion over the rich, fertile lands of Aldenard. They made war upon one another, as such matters go, and in time, the invaders proved the victor, driving the defeated Elezen into the dense, nigh impenetrable forests of the Black Shroud. If the Elezen survivors sought sanctuary in their new forest home, they were sorely disappointed, for the warrior woods themselves seemed to war against them even more brutally than the invading Hyur. Thus, the Elezen had their first taste of the Green Wrath, the fury of the lords of the Twelveswood. In time, some Hyur were driven into the Twelveswood as well. At first, these old enemies renewed their old war, and the forest floor was stained red with the blood of Hyur and Elezen. But what were the paltry weapons of mortals against the divinities of the forest? Elezen could slay Hyur, and Hyur could slay Elezen, but even the invading Hyur could do nothing against the Green Wrath. With a new, insurmountable enemy before them, Hyur and Elezen set aside their hatred for one another and fled, together, to where nature's fury could not reach them, underground. And for 3 long centuries, these entwined peoples eked out an existence in the caves, fearful of the trees even as they longed for the warm caress of the sun. They expanded their underground dwellings, in time carving the ancient city of Gelmora into the earth and stone beneath the land. And to this day, ruins of Gelmora still dot the Black Shroud. And there they might have stayed. Perhaps, in another lifetime, it might have been Gelmora the Undercity that joined the Eorzean Alliance alongside Limsa of the Waves and Ul'dah of the Sands. But fate had a different tale in mind for the Hyur and Elezen of the Twelveswood. There was another people inhabiting the forest, the Igsal, a feathered, bird-like people who now live in Zelphatol and Kurthus. Until some 600 years ago, however, they had dwelled in the Twelveswood, until one day they, too, faced the Green Wrath and were driven from their homes. It is unclear precisely what caused this, or why the elementals turned upon their exiled guests. Perhaps the Ixali population had grown too much too fast, and they were forced to fell one too many trees to accommodate more of their people. Nevertheless, the Gelmorans awoke from their beds one day and found that the Ixal were no longer their neighbors. Hearing this news, the Gelmorans, by now no longer truly caring whether they were Huer or Elazin, took their first tentative steps out of the darkness and into the light, wondering if they could now make a living under the sun. But they also understood that they first had to entreat with the true rulers of their forest home, the Elementals. Using rudimentary magics preserved from the preceding 5th astral era, the Gelmorans tried for 5 decades to make contact with the mysterious, seemingly whimsical masters of the wilderness. One day, a man named Joran succeeded. It is said that he cleansed patches of corrupt ether in the land, planted saplings in their place, and offered prayers to the elementals. In time, after many such plantings, he at last heard their voice. It was discovered that the elementals were beings who could, if not be reasoned with, then at least be heard. For the Gelmorans, this was a tremendous discovery, for before this, the elementals would seemingly unleash their green wrath without warning or mercy, like a sudden avalanche or a spring flood. With the will of the elementals at last known, the subterranean Huer and Elazin could leave their caves in safety and live in the woods, rather than in fear of them. They founded the settlement of Quarry Mill to hew and shape stone in anticipation for their new above-ground city, and soon the Gelmorans were no more. Now they were Gridanians, though not all of Gelmora's citizens agreed to live new lives under the sun. Nevertheless, the ancestors of today's Gridania chose for themselves a new destiny. Now that they could commune with the elementals, they could at last found their own city above the subterrane and take their place amongst the burgeoning city-states of Eorzea. There was, however, one last gift the elementals would grant unto the Twelveswood's new tenants. To Joran, the conjurer who first heard the elementals, was born a son. The boy's birth name is lost to history, but his fate was sealed the moment he arrived into the world with 2 most peculiar bumps on his head. Those bumps grew into horns as time passed, and that was the least unusual thing about him. The boy grew, though even before he entered his teenage years he stopped aging, his form locked in an eternal youth. His wisdom and knowledge, however, was unmatched from an early age, and he was capable of predicting unusual weather and other natural phenomena for reasons that were then unknown. A child of divinity, said the people around him, and they celebrated him for it. Then, in time, celebration became reverence, and he later explained his inexplicable youth as a sign that the elementals had chosen him to be a mediator between them and humanity, where he could hear their will even more clearly than his vaunted father ever could. The boy put aside his birth name and called himself Ohokpota, which was the sound made by the waves of ether when the elementals spoke to him. Ohokpota was the first Pajal, and with his birth and eventual ascension to rulership over Gridania, he laid down the traditions of governance that still persist in Gridania today. And though Ohokpota eventually passed from old age at the venerable age of 272, more Pajals would be born from time to time to Gridanians, regardless of the races of their parents. And with their inborn abilities to hear the will of the elementals, they commonly rose to positions of leadership and influence. Perhaps thanks in large part to the shelter provided by the elementals, Gridania in many ways has not had quite as tumultuous a history as its Eorzean neighbors. The politics of the forest city were not as tumultuous as the near-anarchy of Limsa Lominsa, nor was there a bitter civil conflict as in the founding of Ul'dah. It did not fight a 1,000-year war with dragonkind like Ishgard, or suffer a mad king and then a brutal occupation under Garlemald, as did Alamigo. Though this is not to say that Gridania has not had its own share of troubles over the centuries. The Creeping Death was a disease borne by Chigoe, a type of winged vilekin, that destroyed nearly 1/3 of the Huer population some 3 centuries ago, radically altering the demographics of Gridania with an impact still felt to this day, and it was only stopped by the timely intervention of Ul'dan alchemy. The Ixal returned half a century after the Creeping Death, buoyed, figuratively and literally, by their invention of war balloons. With their arrival, the bounty of the forest was over-harvested, and Gridania would face the Green Wrath once more despite the wisdom of the Pajals. With no other choice left, the city's elderly were forced to sacrifice themselves to spare their children from a second Gilmora. The Autumn War that began 80 years before the present, waged between Gridania and Alamigo, cost many lives, forcing the woodland realm to turn to its neighbors for aid before finally ending Girabania's territorial ambitions. Today, tensions continue to simmer within Gridania, belying the peaceful atmosphere of the city. Though the city is no longer at war with the Ixal, many Duskwhite Elezen are still treated as ne'er-do-wells and criminal scum, because some of their fellows in the past and today turned to banditry and poaching as part of the old rivalry between Duskwhite and Wildwood Elezen. Indeed, every so often I hear tales in its taverns that once a Duskwhite member of the Lanterns Guild confessed to his crime of theft out of remorse, and due to his heritage, his compatriots, who pretended to be innocent, got away with their misdeeds while the Duskwhite was stripped of his honor and freedom. Meanwhile, certain bands of Keeper of the Moon Mikote peoples refuse to integrate with Gridania and hunt animals in a manner considered illegal poaching under Gridanian law, and thus are similarly ill-regarded by many Gridanians. How these tensions will resolve, if they will resolve, is not entirely clear to me, though perhaps with the wisdom of the Elder Seatseer Khan Sena, they will dissipate in time. A point of clarity to my fellow Domans. The great forest in which Gridania is nested is called, by the Gridanians themselves, the Twelveswood, while the Black Shroud is the term often used by outsiders. For the city itself, it can be broadly divided into 2 halves. There is Old Gridania, the original founding, built upon a cleared portion of a region of forest called the Jadeite Thick. It is where Gridania's largest markets and the seat of its governance, the Lotus Stand, rests. Then there is New Gridania, a southward expansion reaching a great pond known as the Jadeite Flood, bearing its airship landing, Adventurers Guild, and the headquarters of its armed forces. At first glance, Gridania does not appear overtly different from any other bastion of civilization, save for perhaps the sheer abundance of greenery and nature to be found in its foundations. It has markets, taverns, and inns, shops owned by masters of the arts of carpentry and leatherwork, as well as spear-armed guards to keep the peace, and stone-cobbled or earthen paths entwining them all. The ensign of Gridania flies high throughout the city, its yellow backing representing the lands filled with the elemental's power, the white lily a symbol of its people's first communion with those same beings, and the 2 entwined serpents a symbol of the unity between the Huer and Elezen peoples who first founded Gilmora, and later Gridania itself. Its people also, at first glance, do not appear out of the ordinary. For every 10 Gridanians, 4 are Midlander Huer, 3 are Wildwood Elezen, 1 is a Duskwhite Elezen, 1 is a Keeper of the Moon Mikote, and the rest are of miscellaneous origins. At most, the concentration of Elezen, either Duskwhite or Wildwood, is somewhat uncommon compared to Ul'dah and Limsa Lominsa, though Ishgard to the north is dominated by those long-limbed peoples. Even the ostensible government of Gridania will not seem too alien at first blush. Those Gridanians who hearken to the voice of the elementals are known as hearers, and the greatest among them are the Seed-Seers. These blessed sages convene in the Seed-Seer Council at the Lotus Stand, near the Conjurers Guild in the northern portions of the city, where they debate matters of state and pass laws. Since the 7th Umbral Calamity, however, the Seed-Seer Council has ceded much of its authority to the foremost of the number, the Elder Seed-Seer, Khan E. Senna. And if that were the end of the matter, Gridania would not be such an unusual place. A conclave of city elites, ruling it with its wisdom and writing its laws, governing its bustling markets, and sending forth its legions of archers and lancers and conjurers. Hardly unheard of. But, as I have spoken before, the will that bends Gridania is not that of the Seed-Seer Council or the Elder Seed-Seer or even its collective people, but, rather, the elementals. I confess, it has been difficult to find much of substance regarding the elementals beyond that which every Gridanian knows. They are beings of pure ether and immense power who have ruled the Twelveswood since at least the 5th era, more than 16 centuries past. They are capable of driving whole civilizations from their domains should they wish, and the very forest is at their beck and call. They shielded Gridania from the worst of the 7th Calamity by raising the Great Barrier of the Ermine Hedge, and it is said that they once struck a man dead in an instant when he dared to pilfer forbidden treasures of the forest. From the perspective of mortals, the elementals might as well be gods. Indeed, some Gridanians believe they are fragments of the goddess Nofika, the patron deity of Gridania herself, and many Gridanian practices regarding the masters of the forest are nigh indistinguishable from common religious practices. Rituals of purification and cleansing, offerings of meat and grain during festivals, even one instance of human sacrifice, albeit it was done voluntarily by the elders of the city to appease the angered elementals so that the younger generation might live. Thus, it can be said that Gridania is a city ruled by the divine, a realm where mankind does not master nature, but where nature masters mankind. The Seed-Seer Council, through consultation with the elementals, dictates how many woodland creatures may be slain each season for their meat and hides, how many trees can be felled for their lumber, how much land can be cleared for sowing grain. The elementals' concern is not the profits or, at times, even the welfare of humankind. Foreign merchants thus find it discomfiting to trade with Gridania, as the flow of goods in the city is not dictated solely by the ancient powers of supply and demand, but by the decree of forest gods. The elementals are not invincible, however. Even they were weakened badly by the destruction wrought by the 7th Calamity. Bandits that once feared to pluck a single fruit from the wilderness now run amok, clashing with the city guard and taking what they please when they please. That the Twelveswood itself has been slow to recover from the calamity seems likely connected to the health of the elementals, and caring for the forest's ethereal lords is one of the primary tasks of the Gridanian conjurers. Few things are pleasing to the elementals as conjurers cleansing pools of corrupted ether in the forest, and conjurers find fewer joys greater than ensuring the well-being of the elementals. Because of the nature of its governance, Gridania is not known as a great trading power. That is the purview of Limsa Lominsa and Ul'dah. Nevertheless, it is hardly an idle nation, and every day the city and its surrounds are abuzz with people hard at work. It should be no surprise that Gridania's lumber industry is renowned throughout Eorzea, with its abundance of fine timber trees cared for by the city's legions of conjurers and botanists. The city's hearers negotiate with the elementals to determine which and how many trees are to be cut. Then the loggers hew the forest at the hearer's direction. Oftentimes, new saplings are planted for every such felled tree. Much of this lumber is shaped further by the Gridanian Carpenters Guild, and it is said that there is little these woodworkers cannot make from the Twelveswood's bounty. Farming, too, whether growing grain or fruits, also occupies much of Gridania's time. As there is much game to be had in the Twelveswood, hunting to obtain meat is also a common activity. As raising animals for their flesh and milk is forbidden by the elementals, a Gridanian who wishes meat for their supper must look to the hunted sort. As with the lumber trees, hunting is strictly regulated, this time by the Trappers League. The League, alongside the Wood Whalers, punish poachers for their wood sin should any poaching be discovered. Leather from such hunted animals is also put to good use, and fashionistas from other Eorzean cities gladly travel to Gridania just to peruse the wares of the fen eel fineries. Now, my fellow Domans might have heard tales of the Order of the Twin Adders, and conclude it is the sole military order of Gridania. This is not entirely untrue, as the Grand Company has absorbed its sister military units protecting the Twelveswood, but any visitor of Gridania will soon learn of the Wood Whalers and the God's Quivers. Of the two, the Wood Whalers are the older order. They are a force of lancers who have warded Gridania from threats from within and without since its very founding. Clad in hard leathers and drawing upon ancient spear arts, they move with speed over dense woodland, bare rocks, rugged underbrush, and stagnant marshes to protect forest and home. The Wood Whalers are divided into 10 units. First Spear is dedicated to training new recruits, while Second Spear is charged with the safety of the city of Gridania itself. Ninth Spear is tasked with arresting poachers, a dire crime in a realm where one slain game animal too many risks the annihilation of all. The rest of the Whaler units are posted in various regions throughout the Twelveswood. These warriors of the woodland realm strike an unmistakable appearance with the lances and the half-masks they wear to obscure their eyes. It is said that the Whalers are so devoted to their duties that they would risk the wrath of the elementals themselves, and these masks would hide their identities from the Green Wrath. Though, as it is said that the elementals look not upon a human's outward appearance, but rather their soul, perhaps these masks are simply a matter of tradition. The Whalers are a skilled lot, knowing the Twelveswood as well as they do themselves. So long as they patrol the forests, even Garlemald could not infiltrate Gridania's borders easily, though complaints regarding the Order's low pay are not rare. Dark whispers in far-flung Gridanian taverns assert that such low wages could drive a man to bribery, perhaps even betrayal. Nevertheless, the Wood Whalers are a respected order, and their leader, Swethina Brookstone, is highly regarded. Every moon, you may see these masked lancers gathered around a great bonfire, honoring those brothers and sisters at arms lost at the Battle of Cartano more than 5 years past. The God's Quiver, in contrast, is a far younger order, having been created in response to Ixali raids into Gridania's borders, perhaps as a counter to the advent of Ixali war balloons, which the spears of the Wood Whalers could not reach as they flew over Gridania's borders. The Quivermen stand at 1,800 archers, divided into 12 units of 150 warriors each. From their citadel in the Quiver's Hold in Gridania, they deploy their forces to tall watchtowers throughout the Twelveswood, each unit rotating through Gridania's lands to ensure their readiness in defending any part of the forest. The Wood Whalers and the God's Quiver once stood independent of Gridania's Grand Company, the Order of the Twin Adder, and before the Seventh Umbral Calamity, they bore their own chain of command, even if they readily offered aid to the Adders as circumstances arose. After their grievous losses at the Battle of Cartano, however, they were reorganized and placed under the command of the Adder's Nest. Much of the duties of the Wood Whalers and God's Quivers keep them within Gridania's borders, and, outside Gridania, it is more common to see the yellow of the Twin Adders than the green leather of the Whalers or the crimson and brown of the Quivermen. Gridania these days is much as it ever was, full of energetic, unostentatious people who revere the hosts of the bountiful land in which they reside. There is a sense of renewed vigor now that the pall of war and calamity has lifted, and every day its streets brim with a quiet joy. Some obstacles to true peace remain. To my knowledge, Duskwhite Elazin and Keeper of the Moon Mikote still face discrimination within the city, and Gridanians must keep vigilant for overuse of the forest's abundance so long as the elementals persist. With time, however, and the wisdom of the elder Seatseer, there is hope that those wounds too will fade, just as the scars of the seventh umbral calamity slowly heal through the city's unrelenting efforts. Should you visit Gridania, you will surely find that there is a tranquility to the city that cannot be found elsewhere. The same hustle and bustle as some of its sister cities in the Eorzean Alliance may not be found in Gridania, but it brims with sublime natural beauty. Sit at the Apkalu Falls, where it is said that the great Louisoix Leveilleur preferred to meditate. When you are there, listen to the bubbling of the pure waters, and feel your worries and distractions slip away. Enjoy the fine fruits and meats from its markets, fresh and ripe as though harvested the day before, and lose yourself in the minstrel songs at Minketo's amphitheater in the heart of the city. With the wood's will guiding the city, Gridania's peaceful days are sure to have only begun.